Hey everybody, thank you for joining vBrownBag. Tonight we are joined by Ben Qual. This is talking about Azure Monitoring and Operations. Tonight this will be hosted by myself, Louis Aguiso, and Ken Nailbone. Say hi, Ken.
Hi, Ken.
Oh,
Terrible joke, I know.
ah. So we're going to be turning it over to Ben here in a second. Just as a reminder, you want to ask any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A or chat on GoToWebinar for those who are live, or in Twitter using hashtag vBrownBag. We'll try to field those to Ben as they come up. All right, Ben, I'm going to make you presenter.
Look at this, I can share things.
Look at that.
So, sorry, better close that tab. Anyway, yeah, no, thanks so much for having me, Ken and Lewis. Can you see my screen? I can see 100% audience for you inside.
Yes, we can.
So I'm trying to work out how to minimize this GoToWebinar window now. Anyone?
We don't see it, so it's fine.
Gone.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
we don't see it.
I do. It impacts me. So today we're going to, so thanks for having me, Ben Qual. I work at Microsoft, which we are, as you haven't seen already through the series we started here, been doing quite a bit of work over the last 5-6 years, particularly around when we get to Azure, and even more so, you'll see a lot more around open source. So when we talk about management, security, operational work for around Azure, from Azure, for Azure, from Azure for on-premises or other cloud, there's a lot of different options there. Some of it's going to be first-party based. Some of it will be third-party based, and we can sort of go into how that works and why and where you would use it versus the other options. So if you haven't logged into Azure before, this is pretty much a landing page. It's the Azure portal. It may not look exactly like this because you can go and do things like customize your portal. You can do look and feel. I mean, everyone knows dark themes are always the best, so it's dark. But you can then start to pin different things to different dashboards depending on who's using them. You can set up multiple dashboards as well to sort of give that view. Just to make myself remember what time it is back in Australia, where I'm from. It's 10:30 now, so Grant Orchard should be up. He's probably not. He's a lazy bugger. We all pretty much know that. But you can pin all some maybe your common things in here, set up dashboards and views and topologies that you might like to go and look at and see. So great way to start. Go in there, look at this, go and do something like if you want to go and provision a VM. So if we want to go and say set up a CentOS machine here, we simply can go in, select our CentOS image we want to look at. So I'm just going to go CentOS 6.9. We can go and create this machine here. It's as simple as going in and setting up our machine name, which will be BrownBag, what kind of disk type, a username, which would be root, or wait a sec, probably not. Put in our SSH key or password we may want to use here. And then provision away once we go and select our VM size and other options. I'm not going to hit yes now because we really don't want to see a VM provision. That's kind of a little bit boring. It's pretty simple to do, and you can go and do this very, very easily. And this is going to be across like storage, networking for maybe a storage account or Azure Files or different sort of configurations you may want to do. Now, once you've gone and set this up once and you've got used to using the portal, you may want to start to be a little bit quicker to deploy. So you can connect up into Azure as well via things like PowerShell or Bash. In fact, you can run Bash on a Windows machine, of course, as well as on a Linux machine. And PowerShell is open sourced and supported on Linux there now. So you can pull this up in the Azure shell. And this is one of my favorite places to go, to be honest, because we can go in here pretty much and do our things really, really quickly. Sometimes even if I have to show something to a Microsoft customer or partner, I pull out my phone if I haven't got my laptop handy, and can run something up straight out of my my Azure app into Azure Shell on the phone. And what's kind of interesting here, you can see we've got PowerShell, which you kind of expect. We also have Bash. You will actually see a lot more options for what you can set up in terms of your management and everything else. Actually, through Bash now, more than even PowerShell, we have a very dedicated cloud native team who are doing a huge amount of work around our containers, container management, container instances, but also doing the work around the cloud shell. So you'll see a lot of providers that you may want to use come in there natively, a lot of things and functions you may want to go and use. So it's really, really simple to use. I actually find it, from my background, I find it much easier to use Bash than I would to use actually PowerShell. So you could do something like, say, you want to see all the containers running inside of your Azure account. We can set up here and sort of hit run and start looking at our things here. If we want to go and set up, say, a new container, I'm doing containers because it's quick, it's easy, it's going to take me 30 seconds versus 10 minutes to provision a VM. If I want to go and set up a container here, copy and paste it because I'm kind of lazy, but we simply just have to go in, easy to use, you can do AZ container create, or for those who aren't American, AZ container create. We give it a name, which is Grant Orchard loves Starbucks, and we know he does. He may deny it, but he does. And then we just select an image, a resource we want to use, and then we put in either a private IP address, or in this case, I've selected public with dynamic DNS. So we can hit that. If I select the right screen, and we can do things here like provision whole machines, we can provision whole workloads, networking, security groups, anything that we may want to use in Azure. I know we've covered a lot of these concepts over the past few weeks, from storage to networking and other applications within Azure. So that can be set up there. You can run it from your console. And it's a way to sort of go and run things as you start to become more adept with the platform, want to look at things in a more repeatable manner. Any questions on that so far, Ken or Lewis? Have you dived around in the Azure portal much yet or not?
We have only one question from the peanut gallery, and that was, can Azure let you monitor the weather in that dashboard that you showed earlier?
Can it let you monitor the weather? I'm sure it can. But by the way, look, just before we go, Grant does indeed love Starbucks, and it is up and running. So Grant Orchard, you're welcome. So can we edit the weather? I haven't actually even tried to go and set that up. So we can definitely see what we can run in here. So we can go and edit this dashboard, and we can start pinning in anything we want here. We can put the time. I'm pretty sure we can do the weather. So
I wouldn't worry too much about spending too much time on that one.
oh, man, after a lightning strike, this can happen. I mean, you want to know where those storms are.
You know, it could be useful in Florida.
It could be useful in Florida or Texas or any.
Maybe you want to know if there's any in the region where your data lives.
Yeah, so no, I can't see a weather option. I'm sure we could go and create a custom tile just straight out of the gallery. There is nothing there, I'm sorry. But you can see time, you can see feedback and go into other settings, but not, it seems, the weather. I apologize.
To answer your question, I haven't spent any personal time in the Azure Web Portal myself, but you know, always open if you got a login or credentials available for testing.
Yeah, well, in fact, you can get a, and by the way, I'm sure you've seen, if you're at VMworld last week, I've been on vacation, so my head's totally in the clouds. But if you're in VMworld last week, there is a lot we are doing with VMware and Azure as well. We can do things right now like replication into Azure for DR or dev test, but also we made an announcement quite a while ago, and you're going to see it happening more and more, where you can start running VMware in Azure, being managed via vCenter. And right now, there's a lot of stuff we're doing with Horizon View as well inside of Azure. There's things there for people who have been VMware traditionally, like, I mean, Lewis, I believe you are at VMware, you can go and look at. In terms of things like creating that container we just looked at, it's a hello world image. It's going to be quick. It's just running Apache Spark, so it doesn't take very long. Sorry, Apache Tomcat. It's going to be very, very quick. So you can see that it's run up really quickly. In terms of getting an account set up, really good thing if you've looked at any of the other rest of the series, or if it's your first one, go and look at the Azure free trial. You don't have to provide a credit card, and you get $200 to start off and play around.
Nice.
I would never suggest you go and I would never ever suggest that if you want to test again, you go and use a different email address. That would be wrong, but you know, that can happen. No, sure. I actually think that's perfectly normal if you want to try and do that. You can go and set that up, and we either give you an indication about what you can use with that kind of money to look at the capacity you can run in there. I mean, if you're looking at running up a big virtual machine in IaaS, it's going to burn out very, very quickly. However, you're using small things, running up containers, running up networking, testing different concepts, you'll probably get a bit of use out of that over the course of a month. And you can even export that all out to an ARM template or a Terraform template and sort of build it up very, very quickly again. So just what we do, what I showed you there is a little bit of stuff of just basic configuring VMs. And this is going to be comparable really for networking, for security gateways, for storage accounts where we do a file share. Everything else is going to be similar here. It's going to be through the portal. It's going to be through PowerShell or Bash. We get a little bit more advanced. We want to start using DevOps. We're going to start looking at other concepts like Chef, Ansible, and Terraform out there as well. We actually have a lot of work that we've done across this. You can use Terraform across multiple subscriptions within Azure to manage the one subscription. And we even do things like in the actual Azure shell. This is inside of Azure. You don't have to go and sit there swearing because you've got the wrong Python version on your laptop. You can run things from within Azure shell. We already have set up. So for example, if you want to go and configure and deploy and manage your machines via Terraform, so you can start doing day 1, day 2 images, we have all the resource providers set up. We've done a lot of work. In fact, I just got off the phone before this call speaking with the Hashi team and going into some details here. But you can see in here, really, really simple to sort of go and use things like Terraform to go and provision your virtual networking, setting IP addresses, security groups and rules, network interfaces, and storage accounts, and your VMs that you might want to provision. So when we start talking about running this at scale and looking at taking it beyond manually setting up and figuring out workloads and doing it as infrastructure as code and checking it in, tying it into our CI/CD pipeline, there's a lot of options there where you can just go and use Terraform, or you can use even, as I mentioned, Ansible, and it's built directly. It's not just resource providers, it's built directly into the Azure console, so you can sort of do it from anywhere. And if you haven't used any of these products, I mean, some of the big advantages is obviously it becomes repeatable. You treat your deployment and your infrastructure as code. You can check it in, view others' work, and start running it through different CI/CD pipelines and doing your work there as well. And things like Terraform, I love from the perspective of the fact that it takes care of day 2, day 3. What about if I've configured 300 machines and I want to change the networking on one single network interface on every machine in one certain manner? You can go and do that and really push it out and take care of your workloads really quickly and manage them, not just to deploy it, but actually to do that on an ongoing basis. Any questions yet? Lewis, Ken, are you happy with that?
So next question was, what about the big 4 monitoring? CPU, RAM, network, and storage.
Big monitoring. I'm going to go into that if you give me one. So I'll go into that right now, actually. How about that? Let's go into let's do an Ubuntu machine. So quite often I will show you more on Linux and Windows. We still love Windows, don't get me wrong, and a lot of our customers still use Windows. But especially when we talk about cloud, Linux is a big user in the cloud, so we have to go and support where our customers are. We contribute code. We do a lot of work around Linux to make sure they work not just well, but even high performance and get customized drivers and configuration inside of Azure. So if we look at a single VM here as a concept in IaaS, we can look at different things. We can look at an activity log in terms of what's being done on top of that machine. This will let us look at all the operations and everything that's been happening here. I haven't done anything to this in a little while, so it's kind of sitting pretty. We can start looking at things like our settings, our continuous delivery preview, and you'll talk more about that at length if you wanted to. But we can also start looking at the metrics as well. So down here on monitoring, we have this built directly into Azure itself. You can start going and say, well, what's happening with my machine? I want to see what I'm using in terms of CPU, credits, or performance, different operations even in there too. So let's have a look at network in. And we can, again, this is machines been sitting there relatively latently. So we can sit there and go, what's it been doing over the last 24 hours, 7 days, 30 days, and start to get views about what's happening in terms of CPU, memory configuration, and a lot of the other workloads we're running on that machine. In fact, when you jump directly into the machine at the very beginning, you get that kind of quick little snapshot view, which you may have seen before, showing CPU average, network average, disk bytes total, and the fact this machine is currently not started, which is probably a good indicator by the fact it's flatlined. So we can go and start and stop, but we can see a lot of the statistics straight off the bat inside of there. Taking it a little bit further, we can do operations manage these machines, and we can look at things like setting up automatic shutdown and startup. So, if you're using machines which are non-production or they're low priority and you want them to shut down after hours, we can start setting that up directly in the portal. Things like backup service, really, really cool. You can go in and just select backup as a first party offering within Azure to start backing up your machine off to an existing or to a new vault, and set up a policy for that machine. So I'm going to do ANF, new daily policy, and we can do things like set up a backup every day at 8:30 a.m. and retain that data for 30 days will be the default. Or we can set that up and do things like set it up, back it up, tick a box, back up that machine, and let's hold on to it for 180 days or even up to 10 years of data. And that's simply a matter of just enabling that backup and hitting validating and OK. We'll actually be now suddenly validating the machine, and we've set it up to go and deploy and back up that machine on a daily basis of protecting data. We can look at things like disaster recovery as well. And one of the things we have to think about, just because we put things in the cloud, doesn't mean they're intrinsically going to protect. We talk about different SLAs. With Azure itself, sure, it's probably sort of shut down on my stuff too much. With Azure itself, we talk about the fact that for a single VM SLA, when you're starting to look at a single VM, if you're using premium storage, high performance storage with managed disks, you'll get about 99.9% uptime SLA in that single instance of VMs. If you're doing things across availability zones within an Azure region, you can get up to 99.95% availability. And then you can do things like zone redundancy, giving you a far higher rate. We start talking about 99.99% uptime, where it's across multiple physical data centers in a region. And then finally, you can do DR as well. Sorry, was there a question?
There was one question when it comes to backup and DR. Is backup making VSS calls for Windows VMs?
Is it making VSS calls for Windows VMs? Yes, it will. So it will actually be consistent on the data. And I apologize for this. I shut down my machine, so I didn't have it up and running for DR. We need to actually have it running to run DR, but the ability to go and then select backing up a machine. So I'm just going to move on a little bit and come back to that in a moment. But to back up to do DR a machine across multiple locations is pretty cool as well. We can do things like change tracking, inventory. We make recommendations. We can even tie it into a diagram of our network configuration and where it sits in our environment that you can go and view, which is dynamically updated based on the requirement. We can see it's got a network card, it's a disk. It's a very, very simple machine, and it's some of the functions are a little bit more limited on Linux versus Windows, but you still have a fair bit of detail and you can get a view of the machine. And this is really what you would look at on single instances of VMs when you're monitoring them, managing them, configuring them within Azure. Let's pin that to the dashboard. That's cool. What about at scale? At scale is where we can get a little bit more interesting. We have, firstly, what we call Azure Advisor. Azure Advisor is looking across multiple things within your environment. This is going to look across the availability of your machines, security, performance, and cost. So when we talk about availability, we're going to be looking at things like, are you backing up the machine? Are you using DR? Have you got managed disks to improve your reliability and availability of your VM? Soft delete so we can restore data. Even things like we've got an endpoint in the profile, but it's only in a single region. Why don't you put that in another region? So we've got multiple failover points across physical locations and different things in here. So you can sort of go in there, go straight away, going, hey, I can see where my machine sits, what I should do. In terms of security, we also, and I'll dive a bit more into security center here at Links and Security, it's going to talk about vulnerabilities. Performance-wise, we're going to look at things where we can improve things like DNS configuration or maybe the storage account, how it's set up. One of the ones quite often here, and I've cleaned up my account recently, so it's not kind of as ugly as it was a while back, is there are a lot of recommendations you'll get shown. For example, if you configure a network gateway, VPN gateway, and you're using 20 megabits a second or throughput on average, however, you've configured your gateway for 2 gigabits, may make recommendations saying, hey, you can probably turn that down a bit. We don't need that kind of performance. You're spending money you don't need to have. Same thing if you're using a VM or an application, a platform service on Azure you don't want to need to use. You can go and look in the same way and start to go, well, I can turn that back down a bit because I'm not actually using all that revenue. And we can see that sort of here under cost. And this is one of the subscriptions being run out of from one of our Indian teams here, where it's got Resize to utilize VM. So straight away here, you can see how that would sort of work. This is in our backup and DR marketing lab. It's running out of our Indian development team here. We can see here on my MySQL machines, less than 5% SQL. We can potentially save some significant money every week by actually going and selecting to resize that machine and following some recommendations. So not only are we trying to be here reactive and look at what's my performance, what's my capacity, what's my management, we can go in and use this to sort of proactively configure and make ourselves effective in terms of what we can use. So for example, here it's going, you probably only need less than a gig of memory and a single CPU versus the 4 CPUs you're running now, which is probably fair in the case that this machine's not really doing much. I'm guessing you'd rarely see many in production in that sort of manner. Switching over to where we want to look at some of these performance details and really get in depth. This is our dashboard from a lot of our monitoring and security products within Azure. Big call out on this is you're going to see the performance of VMs in Azure in here, but you're also going to be able to present up and view the networking topology, performance, application mapping, service mapping, malware penetration, and a whole range of other metrics for machines that are on premises and in other cloud providers as well. So just to get a quick little view about this as a starting point, let's go and have a look at things like our application map here. Application map is bootstrapped inside, it's very, very easy to bootstrap inside your Java and .NET applications particularly. And we can start looking at things like, great, CPU and memory, awesome. How about we look inside the application itself and see what we can optimize? We have it set up here where we have a host to a retail web. It's going off to a storage account, a SQL database. It's got an endpoint here and also a queue for the retail web. We can see that there's a lot of calls going off to the storage account, and 25% of the time, there appears to be some error. So we can actually go and dive into the actual application code, find out what's failing, and start investigating these failures within Azure. Within Azure itself, Azure's pulling the data, but these applications don't have to be inside Azure. They can be on premises or in the cloud. We can do things like this natively out of the portal. I believe we've got a lot of an operational audience in here too. So I'm going to go and look at things from a service perspective instead, rather than a code perspective. This is service map. Service map will actually run again across on-premises and across Azure-based machines. So we can set that up, we can run it. It will show all the different processes here. I'm just going to select, we've got different groups we have set up here, and I'm going to select our all. It's being decimated a little bit recently. As I said, it's been a little bit of active cleanup where I've gone a little bit too hard recently on some of these, but you can get a view and start to say, great, I can see exactly what applications, what is running on my machine, what they're connecting out to, and also not only that, we can see what is connecting into them. So it's a great way of sort of identifying what is happening in environment dependencies, where things sit, and requirements there. Let's try and move this. Sorry, you guys probably can't see it, but there's a control panel in the way for the conference. It's going to slide down a bit or somewhere.
So
we can see that in there.
Real quick, so these are all Windows apps, and obviously we can see the Windows services running inside of it. What about Linux? Would we have the same granularity of like?
Yeah, you do
Linux
have
services?
the same. Yeah, and I'm sorry, there's been a lot of cleanup underway here, so it's not as feature-rich as I want to show you. Normally, we have a Linux machines in here as well. I've even set up a process on a NDMP daemon process, which is actually making rogue calls out from a CentOS machine. So I do normally set up, we've just done a lot of cleanup. And this is not just the data right now, it's also historical data as well. You can go back to 1 hour and start looking at 1 hour of data. And we can even go to the specific start, end date, and start going, well, let's take this back to maybe well, 2014 won't really work. That's the wrong one to go to. Let's take this back to April 10th and look at an hour of duration at that time frame then. Sorry, let's get the time frame right. April 10th, it's only doing an hour of duration. You can start to get a view about what's happening there. Back then, this environment probably didn't exist. So we keep doing a lot of rebuilds in some of our test environments here. So you can sort of get an idea that you can go and view this data. Let's see if it gets me in June. Let's see if we can get some data up near the data point here. And we can get a view of the data that's happening there. Oh, it's totally been cleaned out. I apologize, guys. Normally I can show you a fair bit more in here, but there's not a heck I can do right now. But it works the same way for the Linux, all the Windows machines in here. And you can go and also start to view, you can start to see some issues. You can dive into that machine and see what it is, server name, you can see what's running on it. We can take a bit of a deeper dive and start saying, what about the properties of the machine itself?
Mm-hmm.
What's been running, what version is it, size. We can view alerts, and we can set these alerts up based on different metrics. Right now, there's nothing here. Let's move it over to a machine with the red light on it. And we can see, can't see any alerts here. We can get an idea of some of the alerts that are happening here. In terms of what's happening, it's not a lot. Let's have a look at log events. We can see this configuration data, performance. We can also look at changes as well. And we can get a view then of sort of changes into that environment and what's been modified in terms of applications installed, services started, stopped, and even the performance over time. I'm trying to move the security bar up and down. Performance over time, and start looking at networking, compute, other factors, and even updates. So we start being able to identify issues that are potentially happening within the machine. The fact where we might need patches and updates. Over here, you can see there's 3 critical updates. We need to install some security updates. This all becomes really sort of clear and apparent in this this view straight away. I apologize, we seem to have a little bit of missing data in there, so I'm just going to take it back one step, back into where we were before on the front page of a lot of our monitoring portal here.
Real quick before we
sorry,
go
do you have
further.
any questions?
Yeah, so two questions. One is, does the historical information average out like vCenter? Or in the case of the older it gets, the less specific the data gets, or is it the same granularity from start to finish?
It can be the same granularity start to finish. We store the data. There's a backend database for all of these different monitoring and management agents you see. We have developed specifically running on Azure called Custom. And this database is being gone in and validated for things like public cloud as well. And it can go in and look basically back last 30 days, last 48 hours. You can go and look at a very, very, very specific time set to really dive into that data. This is
does that, so
if
you do like a 48-hour period, is it more like averaged out on a, like in vCenter, it's every 20 seconds when you're looking in the last hour, but when you go back like 5 days or a month, you're looking at stats based on the average of or across of an hour, maybe, or across the average of a day. Are you seeing that the further you go back, that the averages get bigger and bigger, or that you can say, that's 48 days ago, and it's specific down to the same 20-second or so log?
That will be, it will show averages at a larger level, like you talked about.
Okay.
However, because you have the ability to go and search on a specific custom time range, if you want to get more granular, you could simply say, I want to look between 8:44 a.m. and 8:45 a.m. on today.
Okay.
You can actually go and set that up and run it how you say. So there are, I mean, it's going to be running where I'll show those averages in larger instances. This is really, sorry, someone's gone and wiped this, and I was actually just looking into this earlier today, so I apologize for this. It will go and sort of dive into, it will go and give those larger averages, but you don't have yourself limited to just the averages. You can go in and start looking at what's happening within my network security groups. Can you just give me 1 moment? I was going to double check. Maybe someone's home environment. I need to check this out really quickly. But you can do a whole bunch of different things inside of here in terms of what you're looking at, how you go and look at the granularity, and even doing your updates in your Linux machines and your Windows machines as well. So it's fully up to you. You do run them. Sorry. confused on where the data sets have gone in this. A lot of these we have to go and generate a ton of dummy data because, as you probably all know, it's very easy to go and start monitoring tools. It's very, very hard to get data in which is kind of relevant to what you want to see. So I'm able to get a lot of this content in, and you can see it here, and even down into things where you're running containers and you're starting to run containers or microservices to get that kind of view into your environment is really possible here as well. So you can see we've got a container monitoring solution here. And
okay, so then the question is, so if I were to go back and look at like an hour span of time, I'd still see those same small micro segments of performance data. That the smallest level of performance data that I would see if it was in the last hour starting from right now. I go back 48 days and I could select a short 1 hour period and it would still be that same very tiny level of detail.
Yeah, that is correct.
Awesome. And then I guess if you select a wide range, then you start seeing more averages based on how large the range is. So it's not that you're actually rolling it up.
As you'd expect, sort of averages of the data.
Okay.
We're not rolling the data up. There's the same data points, the same points in time being held and kept and stored. What's kind of interesting here, you can go and do things like database checks. You can do health checks on a database level. You can do an Active Directory health check. All this kind of data can get done in depth inside of security and monitoring here. Just trying to work out where my bloody data went. I apologize, guys. It's probably Grand Orchard. I swear I'm sneaking around, and you can't trust Australians.
So the next question actually doesn't require showing anything. It's more of just a straight up question. For the on-prem stuff where you're looking at the connections and the calls between different servers, for things that are actually on premises versus the ones that are in Azure, would the on-premises stuff have to have an agent, or do you have maybe like a proxy or a central collector to provide those same stats and information that you see from the stuff that runs in Azure?
Yeah, so what we do is we have a Bootstrap agent for everything you see there is a single Bootstrap agent that can be run. So we take data in via the Bootstrap agent, it pulls it out of their log data, pulls out performance logs, information, anything around that. It is running as a Bootstrap. You can also import data from other collection sources into these tools as well. I mean, if it's collecting in from a log data, it can be collected in other ways as well, if that makes sense too. So it's not just limited to that. It's actually available in other ways. I'm just trying to find a data set here, which might be in a better spot. So if you can give me 1 moment, please. See if we can get this up. Yeah, so it does need an agent there, definitely. We can go and pull information, and you may look and go and say, we want to pull in network, firewalls, routers, switches. We want to get that data into Azure. How do we go and do that?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we go and do that? And the thing is, that would be about really still having I'm losing my mind today. To have a syslog server that you're pushing the data out to, and then pulling the data in via the new from the agent running on that syslog server as an example here. Let's try to see if you can spare me 1 sec. I may have gone.
So the agent would be like for the purpose of like syslog forwarding from there on to. Okay. Cool.
So it's gonna have a way, because something's got to get to make the connection into Azure, into Custo in Azure, and actually push that data in an encrypted manner so it can be actually read and parsed and everything else. So that is kind of important to have that agent in place. As well as that, what we've shown you here is first-party things. And to be honest with you, if you're already running things on premise, if you're using Splunk to do a lot of log analytics, performance information interrogation, or you're using Nagios, or you're using Sumo Logic or something else, using Azure doesn't mean you have to stop using those solutions. In fact, I mean, a lot of the time I would recommend you don't. Unless you haven't got something in place already, I wouldn't even start by looking at this. I'd use what you have, because it will actually work from. So you can go and run that and view that all from Azure. So I just wanted to see if I could get another copy of my data set up here, but it appears like someone scrubbed out a lot of the data. I apologize for this, guys. I want to show you a little bit more content inside of here. But you can go in there and just kind of use. What I was going to flick over to now is also security. And again, this is running on premises. It'll run on premises. It'll run on Azure and also multiple clouds as well. And we can start looking at things, policy. So we actually don't just do things like reactive analysis and start going, hey, we need to put this in place. We can actually look at security policies we've set up on a whole subscription inside of the security center. And this could be where we're looking at internal consumption. And sorry, I've covered on this one here. And what we have set up here, so we can start getting a view here where we can go, well, actually happening inside a subscription, we can set up policies and put them in place so we can start to view a policy and set those up and manage them that way. We can look at where our compliance fits, any changes that may have been made in that time, and also then down into security itself and hygiene. So how are we updating, how are we protecting machines? We go and look at computer net and apps. We can see which ones of our machines are being monitored, which ones aren't having agent health issues, and even based on what's running on these, which ones have machines which have where they're not protected and need updates. We can see where endpoint protection issues exist. We can see missing scan data, a whole range of different things here where you're saying you're not meeting the security policies you really should. So if you're running a machine in the cloud, you want to make sure, if you're running on premises for that matter too, you want to make sure that you're setting up the, you're putting endpoint protections in place, because particularly if people are out scanning things like TCP 3389, you want to make sure they're protected. This is going to go out and review and set up and view and look at a lot of different machines out there to see how they're protected, what's in place, and what has good signatures or bad signatures in terms of virus or endpoint management. We can go back into Security Center here and start also looking at things like our threat levels and even start running incidents and other things. There's a lot of different options you can go in here and sort of see in view.
Are you setting this to a specific certification like PCI, DSS, or any other ones? Like, are you setting it to any specific level, or is this based, is what we're seeing mostly just on industry best practices? And then if you want to do anything more than that.
It's predominantly based on industry best practices firstly, and then secondly, on actual policies you can put in place and look at and view. And you can get a view of sort of any suspicious activity happening, any threat analysis happening. We'll even go and look at going what constitutes an incident, because a single attack doesn't constitute an incident, but multiple attacks in a specific way can actually constitute an incident response. And also taking it back a step, when you're talking about compliance, you mentioned PCI, and I've got a bit of a bugbear on that always. PCI compliance, which is for the credit card industry, if you're holding customer credit card data. If you're holding and processing customer credit card data, there is a set of requirements about how you hold that data. If you ever go and look at that data, the scan of PCI is pretty simple. It's just, hey, you're secured and you're in a good state. The questionnaire itself is something which you're not really going to get into anything like a security center editor, because it's not just talking about technology. It's talking about policy and process within an organization, including HR policy, people management policy, and taking that even back a few more steps. You might be looking at things like saying, hey, I need to make sure credit card data is encrypted. How do you know which data is credit card data? That doesn't mean you have to encrypt every piece of data on a disk. It means you might have to encrypt a single table or a single table inside a database, and that is all you need to encrypt based on where you're holding the data. So it's sort of very subjective in a lot of those, and a lot of them are actually regulated by the industry and via questionnaires rather than technical monitoring products. Take that over to HIPAA, and HIPAA is self-regulating. People like health organizations actually self-regulate how they run and what they need to monitor for.
Right. No, so I used to have to deal with like PCI audits, and a lot of times what comes up is, how is it that you're being notified? How do you see this? And so if you have an understanding of how maybe this provides you that information, provides you the, this is where I get notified when there's suspicious activity. This is the process for that to do it. These are the answers that you have to provide to the auditors.
Which is, I just want to make it clear, because I always hate it when people think a tool is going to fix all their issues. And a tool will not fix issues like that. It's going to be process and tools.
Right. So
like all things out there.
Understanding what these tools add in value to a process specifically, helps you answer the
Yeah.
questions to those auditors so that you can say, you know,
Exactly
hey,
right. Yeah.
I get notified. Because to be honest, one of my answers once was honestly, like, how are you notified when there's an issue in the code and get notified by the vendor? And I literally told them Twitter. I said, honestly, the V community is faster than VMware sometimes. And it's easy for you to say, like, I know the channels for me. This is my process because I know the channels where I can find that information, the people who actually go out there and provide it, and the way that it is fastest for me to retrieve it. I monitor these different channels. And technically that worked, but that was a process. At the same time, how do you use a tool, any other tool, to find a notification, and how does it work, and what is the process, and what feeds into it, are part of that process.
Yeah, no, that is a big part. So it's a good conversation to have. So you can have all that set up. We even set up things like playbooks too. So you want to have, if you actually have an incident happening, bog standard response to an incident would be to maybe send an email, send a notification, send an escalation. We'll also, someone's really played with this environment. It's kind of annoying me a bit, guys. Sorry about this.
You know
it's
what?
always the way. It was fun
live,
earlier.
right?
I showed it this morning in the presentation. Hey guys, I showed it this morning in a presentation. It was great. But you can go and set up runbooks. You can set up webhooks into things like ServiceNow directly out of this, so it can tie all that in together. And I mentioned a lot of the preemptive stuff too. One of the things I should have mentioned, but totally forgot about, is we've even built things like just-in-time VM access into this. So you can, we talk about how do we know if someone can access a machine, when can they access it? We can actually set here and start going, well, rather than give people access to production all the time, even if it's full on admins, let's lock it down into when you need access to the machine and start to do it in the same way that people like ourselves, Amazon, Google, and others will actually protect their machines and workloads and give access just when you need it to.
Nice. No other questions. So from a secure perspective, the playbooks allow you to do some automation on that. Has there you guys seen any concern from some of the customers around, like, a lot of people are always concerned when they say, oh, I want this thing to respond automatically or do something automatically on the environment, which their concern was, what if it accidentally brings it down or turns it off or disables something that makes the application run?
Yeah, so when you're talking about policies and how you run these kind of solutions, so if we go and look at, for example, here, these aren't created by us. This is the same way you would be, you would set up something like if you're on premises today, you may say, hey, if this happens, then do this. It's creating a playbook and a run book of things that can run through. So it's defined by a customer, and they decide what they do and what part of it they actually own and configure. So I'd say it holds the same level of risk in terms of that. I mean, we could look at something and say, well, if we see this kind of penetration behavior, pull a machine out of a cluster. And that could be fine. But it could also be a major issue too if you haven't configured your cluster properly, or it pulls 4 machines out of a cluster, which is 4 machines. So I think there's got to be a fair bit of self-regulation in how you set it up. We provide the tools to go and design something, to go and build that logic in together and to do certain things, but we don't actually do it for the customers. They can look at, for example, some templates we may have pre-configured. They can go and look at different plugins you'll see here about taking separate actions and so forth, but we're not going to create that actual response for a customer. Makes sense. Again, it's going to be up to the customer to make that playbook themselves, make settings and make a decision if they will make changes to the environment and what they will do, and on what triggers they will make those changes.
So that was very interesting. That actually looked like flow, but when you consider
Logic app.
Yeah, so the Logic Apps Designer, it basically looked like flow. So if you consider it's Flow Enterprise, which is basically focused on the idea of like, hey, let me go mess with my Azure workloads, which you wouldn't normally do on a flow workflow, but you would. In here, it's like, okay, well, this is specifically for this purpose.
Yeah, and we can go in. I mean, this is linking into a Logic app, which is going to link into a security policy and incident. So you can go and view it here. If you don't want to use the visual view, you can go and, great, I want to write the actual flow. I want to write the actual Logic app data myself. You can go and use the templates as well that we provided. So if you want to start just dragging things in together and start saying, well, in the instance that we see a request come in and this is triggered, we can post a URL, we can make a step, we can put a new step in, and it could be to send an email, to put something onto a Slack channel, Teams if you want to be Microsoft centric. We can do a whole range of things in here, built directly into sort of security instant response.
Interesting. Yeah. So basically, it looks like Flow with caffeine.
Yeah. But it's actually kind of cool because it's linking into our logic apps, into sort of your microservices, even visual-based microservices inside Azure, platform-based services that you can sort of link in together and start to build out responses which are much more advanced than, say, what we would have looked at as a Microsoft-centric solution a few years ago with things like was it a Parlous, which became System Center Orchestrator. Or you can even do this if you don't want to use, for example, our tool set in here too. You can simply link straight into something like an Ansible script you want to run if this happens, or a Chef script. You don't have to actually use the Microsoft products to run your actions and so forth.
So I do have one area more from like a cost perspective, that from a cost monitoring. Are there other sections that you want to go to, but maybe before we get there?
Yeah, really, really quickly. I was going to show you the DR bit, which I didn't have ready to go before because I'd shut my machine down in earlier when I was trying to cut down on my spend in my personal account. But we start looking at things like DR. This is really easy. We want to do DR in the cloud. We want to do, quite often we will do on-premises to Azure. We can do this through Azure Site Recovery. We can do this through someone like Zerto or Cloud Endure, other solutions out there. We also want to do maybe region to region if we have an issue in a certain location, physical Azure location, set of data centers constituting a region. We want to be able to replicate over to another physical location and be able to select where that is and the replication schedule and what we're replicating here. So we can go in here and select to replicate a machine to a totally different location. I'm going to select Canada East just because. We select what kind of storage account we want to use. We put up our replication settings, and the account subscription is going to connect into the services vault by policy. How much retention are we going to do? So 24-hour retention means we're going to hold 24 hours worth of data point snapshots. It'll do asynchronous replication with up to about maybe 2-3 minutes of recovery point objective. And you can go and do things as well and set up. You can set up your actual application-centric snapshots. So it can take application consistent snapshots, maybe on an hourly basis, 30-minute basis, keep 24 hours of those. And you set your replication up here, and it'll go through, create this template, and set the replication policy up, and you're actually protecting VMs, and that's done. It's now replicating the data. It's to another location, to another physical data center. You can go and do things like, we're probably all familiar with the concept of what we do with Site Recovery Manager. We can set things up and run them as a test failover. Same concept here. We can run those whole VMs up as a test failover and keep them running to maybe bring up an environment which is non-production that we want to do test and development on. We do a whole range of things here and sort of pick when we are. And again, that's an Ubuntu machine, so Linux-based. It's not a Windows-based machine. We can, of course, run it on Windows. And we can go and see this here has deployed out. And we can go and see how it's being configured and set up, and the whole replication options that's being done here. So we can see our demo ASR instance here, pin it to my dashboard, and we can see it's set up. It's set up a virtual network on the other side. We can go and view the actual replication, anything that's running in here, and it's actually done for your DR and your backup. And I think that's a pretty cool thing to show.
So what were the type of endpoints that you could, so it's not like from Azure to on-premises or another availability zone or where else?
Well, there are a few different options. We can do DR from on-premises, from physical VMware or Hyper-V into Azure.
Okay.
And that can be through Azure Site Recovery, but also people like Zerto, Cloud Endure, and others. Within Azure itself, again, you could go and run from a marketplace. We've got a great partner, someone like Zerto. You could go and spin up, sorry, wrong spot to go for that. We could go up and spin up a Zerto instance and do premises to Azure or Azure to Azure via Zerto replication from the marketplace. Or, as I just showed you, Azure Site Recovery will be Azure region to Azure region. So from one location to another physical location, Azure Data Center. And you can set that up and do that replication and then do things like your test failover, your actual failover when you want to, how you want to.
What about EC2?
Options from DR, from Azure to AWS is not there. It's not something we're providing. I'm not going to talk too much about the futures. It's been discussed very, very heavily. I'll tell you right now, when we look at providers, say like Pivotal Cloud Foundry and others who are talking OpenShift and talking about multi-cloud, on-premises and multi-cloud, we are very, very interested in not providing any friction there. So we are not providing this natively. If you want to go and use Zerto, Cloud, Endure, or others to provide this functionality, again, I wouldn't object, because you're going to do what you need to do as a customer. You're not going to do something otherwise. I'd say there'd be a bit of complexity in migrating from an AWS instance to an Azure instance, or vice versa, because we use different templates.
Right.
So the actual VM types are very, very different. We have our VMs as VHD images in AWS, for example. They are, I forget the extension type, but they're Zen based. So you're going to see some complexity in trying to do that replication. We can do things like migration back and forth. We're not doing the continuous DR. There's a lot of challenges around support and the control of the environment. So on-premises to Azure, yes. Even from Azure back to on-premises, yes. And Azure to Azure, yes. But from AWS to Azure or vice versa, we don't provide that as a continuous replication mechanism. Just because we can't have the customer can't control kind of the equipment at this stage. Well, we can definitely do that with with some of the third parties, as I mentioned, like Zerto.
Nice. Looks like that answered the question for them.
Yeah,
got the thumbs up there.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's super easy, because it's just, as I said, for backup, for DR, if you're running things in Azure, you can go and just tick boxes, select what you want to replicate to, and put them in place. And now the machine is running. We can also show things. So this is a Linux machine here. We can go and turn on things like update management and make it so both Windows and Linux updates can be set up on a policy. You can approve them, and not just across one machine, but across, say, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 machines in your environment. Decide what updates need to get applied, select the updates you want to deploy, and then the schedule where you want those updates to deploy the same way you would today. But again, you're not going and managing the server, the application, the update downloads, everything else. You've got the updates right there, and you go and select what you deploy and when you deploy it across Windows and Linux distributions as well.
So from an update management perspective and scheduling, could you do it, like say you have a distributed or load balance application made up of multiples per tier, right? You know, like a highly available database, you have multiple application servers and many web apps, right? Where maybe you're not running it as a container service, but you have it's kind of distributed. Could you schedule and time it in a way that without having to do the updates without having to take the entire thing down?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we look at update management, I created an update group. You would create multiple update groups with different schedules.
Would that interact with, like, say, the load balancing to pull things out of the load balancer while it's going to do the updates, so that it doesn't impact or cause any issues to the application itself?
We can set that up to do that, yes. That'll be,
Nice.
Again, part of the work you're doing, and when you're sort of setting up the management and everything else. Within our Azure region, we have multiple fault domains within the region. So whenever you do, you can set up your rules to say, hey, I want to make sure it's spread across fault domains, which will make sure, not just when you're doing updates to the OS that you're managing in an IaaS world, like the Linux and the Windows OS, but if we're doing backend updates, we always do our updates in that manner too. So if you're following all recommendations, not only will you protect it against updates that you're deploying, which are under your control and management, but also any updates in the backend that we deploy into Azure. So when you had things like Spectre come out, for example, as a zero-day exploit, we had those updates out within the day, as did other major cloud providers. Much, much faster than what you'd see on premises that happened. And these were done in a way, so if you had architected things properly, where you should be spreading across fault domains, and we have that set up, we set the configuration options, you won't be impacted by our updates or by your own updates as well. But a lot of these things, I mean, to me, it's still very reliant on you as a customer or as a partner making sure we set up our environments in a good way.
Okay.
Like, I mean, if you take it back to a VMware world, if you set up a cluster, that's great. I've done a SQL cluster, it's highly available, but you're running both VMs on the same physical host. It's just not going to work. You're going to be wanting to set up your anti-affinity group for that, for example, to cross-pollinate terms.
So one of the other areas for me from a monitoring perspective would be like on a cost model, because obviously in a public cloud, that's always going to be the concern, right? People moving from an CapEx kind of model of running things in their own data centers, moving to an OpEx model in a public cloud. Even with other cloud providers, there's always going to be that concern over how much money am I paying, because you don't want to have to, people want to worry about phantom VMs running and whatnot. But one of the options there would be like, what is my run rate per hour, per day, per month? And are you able to look at that from more of a forecasting model as well, where you can say, hey, you know what, based on
let me have a look. I only call this out because I've got internal based accounts. We quite often don't reveal the financial data, but I'll see if I can look at this right now. One of the first things you would do is definitely tag that data. So you can go and tag your different workloads and make sure you can properly associate within teams, projects, groups, etc. Whether they be storage accounts or virtual machines or anything else. I showed you briefly before the Azure Advisor screen. This will go and talk about optimizing cost, but it won't give you the overall cost in one day. But if we go down into cost management and billing, I've used this, but not on my internal accounts. I've done this with customers. We can most definitely get in there and start looking at, yes, we can, brilliant. We can start looking at actually what's actually occurring in terms of cost here. We can diagnose what our spend is, what's being deployed. See what I can show here. So, sorry guys, I'm just trying to see. I haven't looked in my own subscription for a while.
It's one of those things where it's like, no.
I don't pay for it, leave me alone. Let's look at resources just to see. This may fail brilliantly, which is why I'm just a little bit curious. We'll see what we can see on different things. No, I can't. It's most definitely available inside of a customer-based account. It's not available in my own internal subscription.
That's fine. It's just one of those things would be like, or is it taking into consideration your average build rate when you're building things out on your environment, where you can see like, hey, if you continue down this path, your monthly bill will be this by the end of the month?
Will it model out the details there? Shoot. Okay, yeah. So this is all internal, which is why I'm stuck. I'm sorry, guys. You can see here, I've just gone to one. I can see the cost per month of these accounts, but I can't drill down into the cost. There's another way to go and do that, but it's internal based, so it won't let me do it. When you're configuring the accounts, it will not show you that information about that. But you can go through and do the analysis per event or start looking at it. As you can see here, I don't have billing access because I don't have access to the entire Microsoft billing access, as you'd expect. But you can go and start viewing exactly what's being used, how they're being used, the usage and credits. And one of the things I personally like is actually putting that in place even before you go and take a further step and start running things. We have, let's see if this works here, products like Clouding, which we acquired, which will not just do the cloud. We can start to really get some granular breakdowns on cost analysis, what we're running, how much things are costing you, both across Azure and also across AWS and on-premises and other clouds as well. So again, I'm kind of early in the financial year for Microsoft now. A lot of things are being wiped and rebuilt, so I haven't got confidence we'll see some dummy data. It doesn't like us internals, guys. I'm sorry.
It's fine. Yeah, it's one of those things where
we can just go here. We can break it down. We can break it down to prod, DR, different workloads, different environments, and really get granular views into what's being spent and on what, and start to optimize and tie it into budget versus real-time use. We then also have a range of, you'll see them come up. Let's go to, here's a little quicker. We also have more over here as well, where we can actually, sorry, let me find this. where we actually list out other partners too that are doing the assessment and optimization of your workload. So we have this ourselves with Azure Advisor. We have Azure Migrate as well. Cloud in as well, providing this. But then if you go down, and we have it listed really under migration partners, but to be honest, most of them continuously optimize as well as providing migration. So if we go down into, sorry, I was trying to remember where we listed out the products and partners here.
Talk about the calculator?
No, it wasn't the calculator. Sorry, guys. Probably just jumping in the wrong spot here. If we start to look into our assessment tools and products here, we talk about our first-party assessment. So things like service map you saw earlier. We'll do discovery, mapping, evaluate, and do cost analysis. Is what I'm looking for. And we have, as I mentioned, Cloudin. We have Azure Advisor. We have all these products as first-party offerings to do this. We also have partners like Cloudomize, Turbonomics, Current, TISO, Logic, Cloud Physics, Mover. Will not just do the analysis for right now and compare it and map it into what you may use and may spend. They'll also do the continuous optimization. So what you saw in Azure Advisor, but kind of on steroids. So it'll do that at a bigger scale. And these will have hooks into the billing APIs of Azure, in your account in Azure, and also into other resource providers too, whether you put it on premises or in another cloud. We have billing APIs, and it can go and look at and give you that up-to-date billing information and data as well.
So awesome. So from an overall perspective, if there's a couple of items from a summary you would want to make sure that people took away from this, what areas would you really want people to remember?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, firstly, get in there, try out the portal, use it. There's free access into Azure. You can get $200 of credit without a credit card. So get familiar with Azure. If you're more familiar using Bash, PowerShell, Terraform, Ansible, Chef, these are all supported, and you can go and use these providers in Azure as well. As a second point, if you are setting things up in Azure, I strongly recommend you look at the Azure Docs page. We've talked a little bit about availability and how you set up properly, but you need to do this from the start. It's not an afterthought. It's got to be done before you really go and set up your environment. This is from your security, your management, your networking, your endpoints, everything. So we have a lot of content in the Azure Docs page around setting this up. You can go and put it in. The good thing about Azure Docs is it's all open sourced onto GitHub. So if you have any changes you want to make, you see in the doc, any faults, any changes, anything you want to ask, any other details to add, you can go in there and raise a bug or make some changes to the markdown and do a pull request, and we will actually look and review them, potentially add it on. So things are running really slow today. I think I've got probably right now both kids on Netflix, so I'm probably slowing down a little bit at home. But you can go and look at a lot of our Azure Docs pages here, and there's some really, really good content to help you build that out and understand how to run it. While that's, thank goodness, this is one of my favorite ones, which is the Azure Virtual Data Center from a networking perspective. And this will talk about setting up redundancy, endpoints, security, identity, connectivity, all things you want to do before you even start to deploy your first application in anger. You get beyond doing testing and maybe a throwaway environment. This is where you should go and start looking at documentation on this. And as I mentioned, everything here, actually on GitHub, so you can go and actually make changes, sign in, give feedback, pull requests, bugs, etc. to that. Another great source of content, if you want to learn a bit more about Azure and how to build things, is some of these learning materials we've put up here for our customers, full-time employees and partners. And we have maintained workshops. Again, everything here is open sourced, so you can, if you want to do your own customized version, go and do it, set it up, configure it. If you want to just basically use what's here and look at other things, maybe make some changes, raise bugs, etc., you can do this here as well. So we talked about how you would go and set up things here. One of my favorite ones here is building resilient IaaS architecture. Building resilient IaaS architecture. And we go through a whole scenario-based piece of work here, some design workshops and hands-on labs. And this is all available to anyone out there. This is not locked. It's not locked. It's actually available publicly. It's available publicly. Sorry, just had kids invade my office.
Well, I mean, at least you're not on video for your office, but it's fine.
It's amazing. You know what? A 10-year-old you think would work out when you put your hand up and point will go away about 3 times, they'd figure it out, but they don't. It's kind of like Grant Orchard at a bar. He never knows when he's had enough. Sorry, I forgot to actually sledge Grant Orchard for about 40 minutes there. That was terrible. We provide all this content here so you can get in there and have a look at the data and information, the hands-on lab, and really sort of get your head around how to build some of these workloads. So we've got quite a few scenarios here. There's 35 different ones we've built out. So, sorry, if I put that in the IM window, will that be good for you guys to sort of easier for you guys to sort of look at too?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll put it on, share it on Twitter as well.
Yeah, excellent. I'm going to pop that in now because I would say that to me is a great place to sort of get in, build it, get familiar. Apart from that, my other comments would be, don't try and demonstrate too much of this where the data has been purged because you can't show much in the way of management when data has been purged, like my environment, unfortunately. I wanted to go in and show you that I wasn't able to show today. So as you start getting real data in there, the more information and sort of content in there you'll find available, the more you'll be able to get in terms of value because you can see what's happening and really get that view of what's going on in your environment. Cool. Any other questions?
Not that I can see.
And just remember, guys, whenever you see Grant, point out that he likes Starbucks. He'll love you.
Oh, he already knows.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the time, Lewis. I hope that was useful.
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much for your time for tonight, going through the portal and some of the operations and the monitoring tool sets in there. It's like this is the second time I've looked at a couple of things in the Azure Services Portal myself, just through vBrownBag. Really great stuff, and looking forward to seeing some more.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
This is going to be on YouTube on the vBrownBag channel. If anybody has any more questions, they can reach you on Twitter, BENDIQ, I think. And
yeah, at Ben Dick.
Ben Dick.
It may have been intentional, but we'll see.
You find that? A couple of questions. Great session. Some people are saying thanks for the session. And so yeah, if anybody has any more questions for him, obviously reach out on Twitter. Everybody's always happy to help out in the community. I posted the one link on Twitter using the hashtag for vBrownBag. But thank you all for joining us tonight live, and thank you so much, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I appreciate it. I hope you appreciate the lack of PowerPoint, which is very un-Microsoft.
I already posted that, hey, we're doing all this live. Bring your hard hats and safety glasses.
Awesome. Thanks again, guys. Thanks, Ken, Lewis.
Have a good night.
Thank you, man.